So first of all, thank you all very much for joining. My name is Bertie Van Wyck. I'm a Senior Insight Strategist at Millennial. And if you're unfamiliar who Millennial is, we're a family of brands and we support people where they live, where they learn, where they heal, and where they work. The topic for today is safe spaces, unlocking the power of psychological safety. And our presenter is Rebecca Greier Horton. Now, Rebecca is a licensed environmental geoscientist who spent decades leading sustainable departments within Fortune 50 companies. For the past decade, she served as a strategist like myself with us here at Millennial. She's an accredited psychological safety advisor and an internationally certified leadership development coach. And also, as an ergonomic consultant, she represents Millennial on the Office Ergonomics Research Committee, and she's also a WellAP and IWBI faculty. Rebecca leads Millennial's Global Enable team, which advocates for inclusive participatory design, enabling individuals with disabilities to thrive in an accessible workplace. So our goal today is simple. Let's make it easier for good people to do their best work. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca. Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thank you, Bertie. What a lovely introduction. And I would like to introduce my colleagues. You just met Bertie. This is my other colleague, Antish. The three of us have the privilege of working for Mark Ketchlove, whom you all know, who leads the Global Insights team. And we work hand in hand to share Miller-Knowles research across the globe to ensure that our clients, no matter where you live, remain closely aligned with relevant workplace insights. We're part of a larger organization called the Global Insights team, and it's led by Ryan Anderson. You might know him as well. We are consisting of design, strategy, and research. Those are our other colleagues residing in those areas, and we work very closely together and operate in a tight dynamic loop where research informs design, design informs research and insights and strategy, and those insights spark new research inquiries from our clients. So you're part of this. We don't sit in an ivory tower. Now that you've learned a little bit about our group, I'm going to share a very vital principle that is at the heart of who we are, and that is psychological safety. So much has changed since 2020. With significant increase in mental health challenges, employees are reprioritizing their lives, and sophisticated organizations are listening. Miller-Knoll has been on a multi-year journey to reassess the value of the workplace, and we've responded by doing what we do best: deep listening, research, more deep listening, designing for the good of humankind. This journey was an exploration of understanding during a highly uncertain time. And at the time, the workplace had never been more unstable. We interviewed hundreds of our clients, both large and mid-sized, to discern what mattered to them and what they were trying to solve for. Pulling from this data set, these topics emerged. I'll just name a few. So engagement, talent development, burnout, attraction, retention, environmental, social governance goals. And we categorized these topics into three distinct pillars: well-being, connection, and change. These pillars became the foundation for Miller-Knowles' Design with Impact point of view that was introduced in 2022. This work reveals the necessity for the modern workplace to be reevaluated through a new lens, a more mature lens that acknowledges the seismic shift we went through in 2020. When individuals and teams feel psychologically safe, they experience enhanced well-being, cultivate stronger relationships, and navigate change with greater confidence. Psychological safety is the underpinning of all three of these pillars. And this is why psychological safety has been a crucial element for organizations for well over half a century. It's especially relevant today. The goal of publicly traded companies is to maximize profit, maximize shareholder value through investment and growth. And best-in-class companies are able to achieve that growth through innovation. So what fuels innovation? Google set out to answer that very question in 2012 with their Project Aristotle. This was an internal study of 180 of their teams that was conducted by their internal people analytics group. And it concluded that with all things being equal, talent, assets, structure, clarity, and meaningful work, the top determinant of an innovative, successful team was, you guessed it, psychological safety. It's interesting that this included the team's quotes, and I'm going to say it exactly, I'm going to read it, to read each other's feelings through nonverbal cues, such as body language. Now, that last part has been particularly interesting considering our digital first migration as of late. So let's consider that as we move into psychological safety. 22 years prior, before Project Aristotle ever kicked off, Dr. Amy Edmondson, who brought in team psychological safety into the spotlight, wrote her PhD dissertation about a small office manufacturer in West Michigan. That company was Herman Miller. MillerKnoll has embraced psychological safety as a core tenet for ourselves and for our clients. Ryan Anderson recently had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Amy Edmondson on MillerKnoll's About Place podcast, and she emphasized that it's about knowing that your team has your back and that you have theirs. It's that culture of candor, but with confidence and civility. Now, according to Dr. Edmondson and others in her field, psychological safety is fading in the workplace. It's resulting in increased stress, anxiety, and burnout. Under these conditions, employees are less likely to share ideas, take risks, or ask for help, and innovation is stifled. Current workplace research validates these suboptimal states. Gallup's work, McKinsey's, Deloitte's work, and then the most recent work that the World Health Organization just completed is called From Loneliness to Social Connection, also validates that these things proliferate in the workplace. All of them confirm that the global workplace is suffering. It's a bit depressing, but the good news is we know what we're solving for, and there are science-backed solutions. So let's dig in. You need some fundamentals for creating psychologically safe spaces, and we're going to start with the space between our ears. To understand human behavior, we begin with the basic understandings of the brain. The pink arrow on the right is pointing to the primal portion of our brain called the amygdala. Developmentally, it's fully functional at birth, and its main job is to process basic emotions like fear and anger. Its response time is very fast, and it's non-conscious and impulsive. That's why babies are impulsive and they just cry, they don't reason. It reacts quickly to perceived threats, sometimes before you even are aware. So to remember the structure, let's use Dr. Siegel's help. He developed an incredible hand model that shows how the brain functions. So you're going to hold up your hand. You can do this with yourself here at home. Cross your thumb over into your palm, then cup your fingers over, and that represents the human brain. Of course, it's much smaller. It's just a model, but that helps you to remember the thumb is the amygdala located there in the back. And the knuckles represent our prefrontal cortex located here. You can put your brain away, but remember that little model. Developmentally, the prefrontal cortex, or from here forward, I'll call it the PFC, doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s, which explains the impulsivity of adolescence. Functionally, we refer to the PFC as the higher brain, since it's involved in higher order thinking like decision-making, reasoning, impulse control, and planning. It evaluates context, weighs consequences, and regulates emotional responses. Interestingly, the way these two areas of the brain work is like an electric dimmer switch. When one is bright, the other is dim, and vice versa. So picture an incoming trigger, something has upset you, and you're going to be charged. Your amygdala is going to light up with fear or even anger. And there it is, pow. This time, you're going to react with your prefrontal cortex, and you're going to absolutely be able to override that part. So once the PFC lights up and recognizes that threat, it dims the amygdala. Neuroscientists tell us that our current day brain structure is incredibly like the brains of our hunter-gatherer ancestors who roamed the savannah. The primal amygdala kept us alive back then because most threats were real. When we heard a low growling or gurgling noise, it was something coming to eat us. So a quick, drastic reaction was in order. It saved our lives. You see, the more familiar we are with how the brain works, the more psychologically safe we can condition ourselves to be. Just knowing that our brain hasn't changed since we were hunter-gatherers, and that most perceived threats in the workplace are non-physical ones, helps us to take pause and take control of our emotions. On the left, we see that the non-conscious primal brain is running constantly, and I do think that is my brain. And since it does, it is impossible for the PFC to intelligently analyze every bit of information that we take in. It's simply too much. In the center is a paragraph, and I want to pause for a moment and let you read it. Now, the way your brain interprets this paragraph demonstrates its ability to take shortcuts. If English is your second language, this might be a little trickier, so don't panic. Not everyone can do this. Most of us can. But the point is, we have these ways of taking shortcuts in our brains so that we don't have to actually process every piece of information. So yes, the primal brain never stops. The hamster in the wheel always is going. And yes, it has to take shortcuts. But we have a built-in regulator to help us process that information and maintain an even state of mind, and that is our PFC. And to keep it running, we need to protect it. Being overstressed shorts it out and dims our intelligence. Have you ever snapped at someone and then had to immediately apologize and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just really stressed right now"? Stress isn't all bad though, because it keeps us, when we're at an optimal level, it keeps us awake and ready for our peak performance. Below that level, we're bored, we're just completely unstimulated. If we go too far above that level, we risk shorting out, burning out, or as some of my colleagues say, crashing out. We can nurture our PFC with healthy living, ample sleep, proper nutrition, and exercise, along with professional coaching to include breath work, mindfulness, and help with reframing. Pause a moment and ask yourself, do I know what triggers my primal brain? And that's not a chat question, so don't pop it into the chat. Or are there times when you become triggered and you, in retrospect, think, wow, where did that come from? Why did that upset me so? We're going to dig into this. This is where having a common language for trigger labeling enters the conversation. The goal is authentic, respectful communication, because being triggered or being the trigger to others shuts down intelligent thinking and stalls innovation before it can ever begin. ABL, the Academy of Brain-Based Leadership, was founded by Leonie Hull and Dr. Dan Radecki. Their safety model is trademarked, but ABL, as an ABL team facilitator who studied under them and certified under them, they agreed that I could allow this as part of the discussion today. The ABL safety model describes fundamental human domains established by neuro and cognitive scientists. These domains are what we value. And yes, if you've been with Miller for a while, these overlap very nicely with our fundamental human needs. This is very familiar to you. Remember, these domains are violated. When they're violated, they trigger a threat response, and we feel psychologically unsafe. We shut down. If you'd like to take a moment to vertically write down or put in your phone, S-A-F-E-T-Y, just down the vertical column, you can take a few little notes. As we touch on each one of these domains, place a check mark, a smiley face, something to indicate that that's resonating with you. If something really resonates with you, maybe put 1 or 2 or 3 check marks. Your goal is to informally rank S-A-F-E-T-Y. There's a more refined way to determine your safety domains and your team's safety domains through Academy of Brain-Based Leadership, And in our follow-up information, we'll provide you their contact information if you're interested in learning more. The first domain is security. Consistency, commitment, clarity, and certainty are all important in this domain. Security-seeking brains want predictability, clear details, and precise directions. The trigger is, well, one of them is change without clarity. That's why psychological safety is at the very core of change management. And I think I even see some of my pro-sci colleagues in the chat who are change management practitioners. This is at the heart of that. Knowing what to expect next is part of a smooth transition into a different environment. Notice the jack-in-box in the upper right-hand corner. As a child, this either thrilled you or terrified you. Maybe even as an adult, it still does. So what's your reaction to it? Do you laugh at the pop-up, or are you filled with dread and anticipation waiting for that to spring out? The other picture is less entertaining, but it is telling about our behavior, the elevator. How important is predictability to you? In an elevator, there's an expectation of etiquette, but what if someone turns away from the door and faces you? That's unexpected. How do you react to the unpredictable? Does this security domain resonate with you? If it does, take note. The next domain is autonomy. Autonomy is the feeling of control over one's environment. It's not necessarily having full control over every choice. It's about feeling like you have some say in your choices. For autonomy-seeking brains, independence, control, and choice light up that brain. Individualism is a hallmark of this domain. Your triggers, being micromanaged, being diminished. Does this sound like you? Take note. The fairness domain. Fairness is the need for mutual benefit in our exchanges with others. Fair exchanges are intrinsically rewarding to the brain. One for me, one for you. One for me, one for you. Three for me, one for you. Unfairness is a universal trigger. Fairness-seeking brains want transparency, opportunity for all, and no favoritism. The main trigger is injustice. Does this sound like you? If so, take a note. And esteem. Esteem covers how we view ourselves and how we compare ourselves to others, and how we think others view us. That's important to an esteem brain. The esteem-seeking brain wants to be acknowledged for accomplishments, skills, and even tenure. I've earned this. I would like people to notice that I've earned this. And if this individual is questioned, ignored, or worse yet, rejected, it's highly triggering. Are you triggered when not acknowledged? Is this your primary domain? And trust. Trust is our social need to belong and to protect our group. The trust-seeking brain wants strong team bonds, loyalty, and collaboration. It tends to have an us against them mentality, and betrayal is the primary trigger. How important is it for you to feel like you belong to a tight-knit group? Is this your top domain? And then finally, and most importantly, is the why in safety. The why is you. It's not necessarily a domain, but it represents who you are, what made you who you are, what your life stages and the demands being placed on you, your health, past trauma. This domain can outweigh any and all, or that this area can outweigh any and all of the other 5 domains. We don't rank this domain, but we're aware of it. Take a moment to review your list on your phone or your pad. Which domain is most likely your top domain? Your top domain is the one most easily triggered. So if you have low tolerance, if someone threatens this domain, that is pointing you in that direction of understanding where you are psychologically. The other domains will be triggered also, but your tolerance for your top domain is highly sensitive. These other domains, while being triggered, the trigger won't be as great. You're not as easily provoked by those. If you will, if you feel psychologically safe to do so, Pop your domain into the chat, your top domain. So you're seeing this variety in the chat, just as I am, which is very telling as you view these. You can begin to get the idea of how diverse the chat is. I do see a lot of fairness, it seems like, but you also can start to comprehend how diverse your workplace is. So this is why we all have different values, and we all have different preferences that protect those values. Remember, these are our fundamental drivers. This is why building team psychological safety is challenging, intentional. It's a journey, and it typically requires professional support. Your organization could be steering you in this direction if you are getting questions like this on surveys. If you make a mistake on this team, will it be held against you? Are the members of this team able to bring problems and tough issues to the table? Is it safe to take a risk on this team? Would anyone on this team be deliberately acting in a way that undermines others' efforts? If those are things that you're being asked, that's an indication that your organization is pursuing actively psychological safety. Let's jump in now. How to design the physical space for individual and team psychological safety. Miller-Knoll's relationship-based work is a framework within design with impact. Do you remember well-being, connection, change? Recall that psychological safety supports all three of these. This framework shifts the workplace's primary focus from task to relationship building, since innovation is fueled by strong relationships. As we work with one another, we need spaces to support interactions at the individual, group, and community levels. Now we're going to launch into a few relationship-based work settings with psychological safety domains called out. If some of this is unfamiliar, if this is your first time calling into a Miller-Knoll call, these frameworks are going to be included in our follow-up, so don't worry, we'll fill in the blanks for you. And as we look at these settings, I want you to think about your top domain that you put into chat and the other potential top domains of your colleagues. You don't want to be biased in judging them, but you can begin to see the patterns and understand maybe where you have some differences. Think about them being supported in these settings as well. Honoring individual psychological safety can look like providing respite space to take time, pause, and decompress. It can also look like a private office. Individual psychological safety is supported in this calming space because it invites you to take a moment, take a breather from the stresses of work. Autonomy is supported since the space is accessed as needed. Purpose, proximity, and permission are all communicated about this space ahead of time. Security is reinforced by the day-to-day assurance that you can step away to reset for emotional support and comfort. It is, quote, there if I need it. The fairness domain is honored because all individuals can access privacy on demand. A private office acknowledges status and accomplishment and lights up the esteem-seeking brain. Autonomy is bolstered through the ability to customize a space and work apart from the group. A bond of trust, though, is extended by sharing the space with team members to use it as a small video conferencing room in the occupant's absence. Because group spaces are owned by a group or team, the individuals who use it support one another's daily work. For that reason, the design of the team facility, the design of the setting facilitates collaboration, knowledge sharing, and problem solving. So let's review these spaces through the lens of team psychological safety. This conference room is adjacent to a group neighborhood and is primarily accessed by that group. Trust is fostered through a shared space because it is our space, and it accommodates a broad range of people, including those who have assisted devices, so everyone in the group is considered. Security is reinforced with the closed door experience that assures visual and auditory privacy. Fairness is honored through an equitable video experience. Face-to-face and virtual participation both have a personal feel. The neighborhood offers a rich variety of different opportunities for interaction and coordinated efforts. The high-status location of this one has a corner office feel that strengthens esteem. The variety that encourages freedom of movement within the group setting lights up the autonomy-seeking brain. Trust is built in with circulation routes and casual stopping points where team members have quick, spontaneous exchanges of information and ideas. Neighborhood B emphasizes more of a standard or a fair and predictable team experience that appeals to security-seeking brains. Trust is maintained by working alone together, balancing independent work and interdependent decision-making. Fairness is maintained with similar and equitable spaces for all team members. This is a question I want you just to think on. When you think of security-seeking brains and you take their position, do you think they do well with unassigned seating policies? Does it now make sense why we keep having this discussion over and over? Community spaces. Community spaces boost psychological safety by strengthening weak ties. Weak ties are those people across the organization whom we don't know as well or interact with as often. We may know them only by sight. Strengthening weak ties is critical to group psychological safety because these people connect us with new ideas, new ways of thinking, and ultimately that advances innovation. If we stay in our strong tie bubble, which are the people who are we see every day, we know what they're thinking, we don't tend to be as innovative because we don't have new ideas being introduced into that circle. So it's great to have those weak ties pulled into your atmosphere. This community setting is a hub of interaction, and people feel connected to the larger organization and its culture by sheer exposure to others. You may not even speak to anyone that you encounter, but making eye contact is the first step in developing familiarity. I know you, you belong here. Autonomy and security are both nurtured with purposeful variety that allows the individual to decide if she wants to be fully connected or maybe just half in, perhaps sitting in a booth with her back to the protected partition to view the savannah or the cafe that lies ahead of her. And finally, our last space is a working community where groups come together to assemble while supporting longer-term, purpose-driven outcomes. Fairness is the hallmark of assembly since all groups have equal access and equitable accommodation across the floor plate. Autonomy-seeking brains light up with this highly flexible and adaptable space where both individuals and groups have control over their environments as they float in and out of various groups. The intrinsic value of community space is the ability to reduce social isolation and promote psychological safety. Psychological safety doesn't just happen. It must be taught and fostered through the design of supportive spaces, empowering everyone to learn, take risks, and grow. I hope you found this brief exploration of psychological safety insightful. It highlights only a sliver of what Miller-Knoll has examined in the past 4 years as we have redefined the workplace, designing psychologically safe spaces that enable organizations to adapt and people to flourish isn't a passing trend at Miller-Knoll, it is part of our heritage. And thank you.
Hi there. Thank you very much. That was absolutely fantastic. Rebecca, I can listen to you forever. It's always amazing to listen to you. If any one of you online have any questions that you have not put in the chat, feel free to type that now and I'll try and get to that. I already have 4 of them lined up. So Rebecca, the first one I have is from Shia. And she asks, is it necessary to have one prominent trigger or does it not matter?
I'm glad you asked. You know, we're human. We have multiple triggers. You typically have one that stands out. You know, there's a formalized assessment that that you can access through Academy of Brain-Based Leadership that actually spells that out for you. And so typically you do have one that you may score just slightly higher, but you may be very evenly distributed as well. It's a journey to discover that.
Fantastic. And Sonia asks, what is your major trigger?
My major trigger, and I think it's worth saying, and I think someone will probably even ask this, do your triggers change over time? And the answer is yes. Because remember, the big why overrides everything. My need for autonomy used to be very strong, but then once I had two daughters, my need for fairness became, I was laser focused on fairness. Literally one for you, one for you, one for you, one for you. So my need for fairness is probably, and justice and fighting for justice and, marginalized individuals. That tends to be like who I am now. So thanks for asking that.
Fantastic. I've got one from Alicia. She asks, how would you recommend approaching design projects to ensure psychological safety is fully considered and integrated?
That's a really good question. And just having, developing the language for psychological safety is that step one. The leadership understanding that it's an important part of your overall goals and your overall organization, and then having a language whereby you can speak that language when you're, having a focus group, having those terms, at your brain's tip so that you can bring those things forward. This is a group that really does value security. They've been through a lot. We need to provide them some consistency, kind of that verbiage as you go into, a design charrette to plan for, what matters right now. And, at Miller Knoll, we do see, the solution for today may not be the solution for tomorrow. And why is that? People's fundamental needs change. So staying in connection with that, through focus groups and surveys and having the language to pull that out of participants is going to be very helpful.
Right. So Sarah asked, what would be the first step to take during a reorganization of office spaces in order to build psychological safety?
Wow, I know I can't see the participants, but I know we have change management practitioners, ProSci on the call. Those are my colleagues. Very important to lay that out. Psychological safety is at the core of change management. So if you're transitioning to something new, remember, our brains, any change, and especially if you're high in security, we think it's a wild animal out there, not just a random email. If you're under pressure and under stress and you get an email that says we're having a meeting at the end of the day, your mind is typically going to go to the negative because we are wired for safety. So, and that, telling someone we're having a meeting at the end of the day, and I think you're going to be really pleased with this. Okay, that kind of gives me a little bit of comfort from my, my security-seeking brain. So it's part of that communication piece, and it's really part of the change management process.
Amazing. I've got an interesting one here from T. Davis. Have you noticed that there is a distinction in designing spaces when it comes to job functions? So comparing engineers versus accountants versus C-suite versus IT, and do they tend to generally have kind of the same triggers?
That's very interesting, and I don't want to be biased because as an environmental geoscientist sitting on a webinar in front of a bunch of people talking about an area that I just have a certification in, I don't want to pigeonhole anyone. There are designers on this call who have seen trends for decades and decades and decades. Typically, we do associate individuals who are scientists and technical individuals, who are needing their dedicated space. We hear that again and again. So that's a trend we see in pre-occupancy investigations. So there does tend to be that creative types, wanting that soaring ceiling above their head, free flow of ideas, not being so confined, whereas accounting and different groups of that nature who want that more heads down, low ceiling feeling. there does tend to be trends in that area, but I don't want to be biased and say that's the case for everyone.
Love that. Love that. I've got another question here from Jordan. My question is, in a hybrid office working environment, have you seen any triggers emerge as more prominent, such as trust or team bonds or autonomy in an office where you are in an assigned seat or assigned space? What would you prescribe to overcome some of these challenges?
That is an incredible question, and yes, yes, we see it all. We hear it all.
Yeah.
Auditory disturbances tend to still be, acoustics still tends to be a trigger point. But as far as from a psychological perspective, the trust factor. I don't know if you've encountered this in your part of the world, but heard of coffee badging, where you have a social contract with your teammates. And yet someone comes in and they badge in and then they just disappear. They have their cup of coffee, they make their rounds, hello, hello, and then they just evaporate. And so that's breaking that social contract. That does wear down the feeling of that, that in-group and that tribe, if you will. And the solution for that, and it's one of my favorite settings, is the neighborhood. So that, that manager of those people, and by the way, Gallup had come out last year and said that the middle manager is miserable. That's Gallup's words, not my words. The middle manager is miserable. And why? Why are they miserable? They're having to oversee adults who coffee badge. And so you have a neighborhood where you're centrally located. Yes, you have purposeful variety. You can move about the campus, but that's your home base. And it, by sight lines and presence, takes that emotional and cognitive load off that middle manager to be able to just do her job. And they know that those people are coming and going, that they are there. So that space helps to foster trust just through that presence and that touch point throughout the day. So we do see that helping.
Fantastic. I've got one here that asks, have LEED standards, which is a standard in the UK, and the trend towards open spaces and glass walls greatly affected those with safety triggers? And I think it's probably an opinion piece, or we can look at something like trauma-informed design. But do you think that openness, that having total views to everything, total access, have that actually affected people's safety triggers?
Well, the security, the big S, needing that high security seeking brain. One of the things that really lights up the security brain is knowing what to expect, transparency. And there's nothing more transparent than glass. So, being able to see, we know from leadership workshops, Joseph White has hosted many of these, that knowing what leaders are doing, kind of where they are, where their heads are at, and seeing them present in the office helps to build trust and security among employees. That has come out again and again in our research. And so these open environments, while they're always there's pluses and negatives to everything, we have seen that fosters that sense of security and trust with just sightlines.
Great. I've got a very interesting one here from Dan, and I think probably a few people on the call might feel the same. What suggestions or best practices do you suggest on a management team where the general manager of the team does not create a safe working environment for the team?
Again, in this last year, we've seen article after article and lots of research about, what is the number one thing driving people from the workplace. It's a toxic manager. The manager is so incredibly important. And when you have a good manager, it makes all the difference. When you have a bad one, you are more likely to leave your workplace. This is part of the culture. Having, again, going back to having the language to speak and understanding. And if that manager, maybe they're not even a toxic person, maybe their safety domain, their top domain is completely different from the people they're managing, their domains. So for example, if I have an autonomy, I'm high on autonomy, and I'm managing people who are primarily have a high need for security, I might think, why are they asking me so many questions? Because my point of view is, I just want to be told what to do, tell me what to do and let me go. Give me the resources, the time, I'll get back to you when I'm done. Whereas someone with security, they want to know each step of the process. And if I'm managing, from a different domain perspective, I need to honor, those individuals. So understanding, the words and being able to communicate with them, that is critical. But there has to be the willingness for that. The ROI, you can pull back to Project Aristotle. There is an ROI for businesses to embrace psychological safety. So all those pieces are there. You just have to act on it.
Fantastic. I've got a really good question from Matt. And he asks, how can we use this data to impact teams that are fully remote?
That is a very good question. And again, we hear this again and again. We are fully remote. With all transparency, we are just global research and planning is a distributed team. It takes incredible effort. So we embrace, the togetherness. We come together frequently, face to face. If you don't see people, you're not going to build that trust, and you're not going to be able to work together with them well. I had a Canadian colleague, who communicated that so nicely. I'm like, yes, it just makes basic sense. So there are ways of driving that. If you'll notice, and I mentioned, I kind of called it out in Project Aristotle, that one of the things that drove psychological safety in that 180 team study was that people could read their body language. If you're only being seen from here up, it's going to be more challenging. You might have to dig in and do something more formal. Engage with the facilitator who says, we're going to take these tests. We're going to discover what your domains are. We're going to discover what your lowest domain, because believe it or not, your lowest domain is just as important as your top domain, because you're trying to understand, how others reacted. My lowest domain is my friend Bertie's top domain. We're just not going to meet in the middle. It's going to take some coaching for us to really see one another's perspective and come together in the workplace and function in a coordinated effort. So that is a very good question. It is doable. It's just a lot more work. You eliminate the body language, and it's much harder.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I can listen to you for days. That was absolutely fantastic. We want to say you a big thank you. And for those of you online, feel free to say thank you very much in the chat, or if you want to put an emoji in. Really appreciate it. And if you do have any projects that you're working on right now that you do want some support on, feel free to get in contact with us. Again, Rebecca, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.